Hello, everyone. I see that folks are rolling in. Welcome to the E.H.Zero launch, the policies and programs for equitable, healthy, zero carbon buildings. My name is Jillian Gim. I'm with the Grand Rapids 2030 District, one of the partners of this project. Additional projects partners are UCC and the City of Grand Rapids. We're going to be starting with Allison giving an overview of what this project is, and then we're going to get into the meats and potatoes of it. So just some housekeeping. You can put your questions in the Q&A, and there's specific periods where we'll be able to have dialogue around this project, as well as please feel free to use the chat with all of your comments and questions along the way. This is a very interactive session, and we really care about what you have to say. So we've built in time to really dissect what your curiosities are. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to Allison.
Thank you, Jillian, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this sunny morning here in Grand Rapids, and maybe some of you are from elsewhere, but really excited to share with those of you that are interested in the commercial building sector and others, some really exciting work that we've been doing for a few years now, but have transitioned to launch our new E.H.Zero program, or Equitable, Healthy, and Zero Carbon Buildings Initiative. And so we will be making slides available for everyone after the fact. So just wanted to let everyone know that. And Jillian already mentioned the partners, but I do just want to take a minute from the city's perspective. And those of you who may not know me, I'm Allison Sutter. I work for the City of Grand Rapids, and I am the Sustainability and Performance Management Officer. And I have with me today Jen Spiller, who is our Healthy and Sustainable Buildings Policy Specialist. You'll be hearing from her later, as well as Layla Islani, who is heading up our master planning process. So the city has been partnering with both the 2030 district as managed by the U.S. Green Building Council and with Jillian and the team there, as well as with the Urban Core Collective and Sergio Sierra Reyes. And while today Sergio won't be presenting, he has done just phenomenal work as a part of this presentation, and we'll have some opportunities in the future to dig in a little more into some of the equity work that he's really been helping to lead with respect to this work. And then of course, just want to take a moment and acknowledge that the WEGI Foundation has been our primary sponsor for this work, and we're extremely grateful to them for that support. And so today, just a quick kind of run of show for what we're going to do this morning. We really want to leave a lot of time and space for questions and dialogue. So as Jillian mentioned, we'll have some specific breaks where you can ask questions, but please feel free to use the Q&A as she mentioned. So I'm going to do kind of a quick pass just from the city's perspective as to why we're focusing on this work from city government perspective. I'm going to go ahead and do a pretty high level overview of the Zero Cities work, which was very compact and dense and has a lot of great takeaways, but we just want to give you kind of the high level synopsis, and then we'll share opportunities to learn more about some of those pieces and how we'll be building upon those into the future if you're interested in that. We'll take a short little break, and then I'm going to kick it over to my colleague Jen, who's going to talk through kind of what is E.H.Zero. And leave some time for questions and answers. So with that, we're going to go ahead and dive right in. And I do just want to take a moment really to acknowledge Morgan with the U.S. Green Building Council, who has just done an amazing job putting this slideshow together so that we can tell our story through these beautiful slides. So a big thank you to her. So at the City of Grand Rapids, just sharing a little bit about why we're focused on this work in the building sector specifically. And, a number of reasons. If you don't already know this, I'm sure many of you do, being in the building sector, 90% side buildings. So we have the opportunity to have the biggest impact on human health in other areas. And the construction and operation of our buildings, right, they have an impact on affordability, community health, as I mentioned, as well as on climate change. And we've really focused in Zero Cities, and you'll be hearing it throughout the presentation in E.H.Zero on equity. And so we really specifically in this space want to acknowledge that Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been disproportionately impacted by environmental pollutants and by climate change. And they've been underrepresented in the design, regulation, and operation of buildings. And that's something that we're working very hard to address as well. And then also just thinking about, it's not unique to the city of Grand Rapids, but we are nationwide experiencing an affordable housing crisis. And there's a significant shortage of affordable housing. And we know that we can help address that by bringing down utility costs and energy costs within homes, and helping to make a number of our homes more affordable in our community. And so just to talk for a minute then specifically about leading with equity, again, from the city of Grand Rapids. In 2019, our city commission finalized our citywide strategic plan. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, I encourage you to do so. In that plan specifically, and as a part of that, we did develop 6 values and our priorities. And so here you can see, and just want to focus on our 2 values of equity and sustainability. So with equity, we're really talking about leveraging our city government influence to intentionally remove and prevent barriers that have been created by systemic and institutional injustice. And sustainability, right, that is where we're really looking at how at the city are we making decisions and being thoughtful about not just the financial impacts of our decisions, but of course how those decisions impact people in our communities, as well as the environment, taking into consideration climate change and thinking about that both from today and in the future. We organize our strategic plan around 6 priorities, one of those being health and environment. And there, our desired outcome in the long term is that the health of all people and the environment are advocated for, protected, and enhanced. We also have in our plan our Grand Rapids equity statement. And so it's a 1 page, and I really encourage you to check it out and look at that. But specifically, I just wanted to emphasize a couple of statements within that equity statement in our strategic plan. We have a very targeted approach on racial equity, and we're working to advance the universal goal of elevating quality of life in Grand Rapids. So as mentioned, it's one of our core values, and we're working very hard to weave equity into all of our decisions, policies, and practices. And so we have made a very conscious decision to highlight equity throughout all the work that we're doing at the city of Grand Rapids. We are fully aware that this presents a lot of challenges, yet a lot of opportunities as we want to lead with equity. And we know that as a municipality and a government entity that we're uniquely positioned to reduce disparities through policy, through intentional practices, transparency, and accountability. And we also know that we have to partner with all of you, with our private sector, with our nonprofit sector, with our academia partners, everyone in our community, with our residents. We need to partner together to really help make Grand Rapids truly be the best place to live in the US for everyone. If you're not familiar with neighborhoods of focus, this was some work that was funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and looked to assess the city of Grand Rapids based on our census tracts. So those are some small distinct areas broken down throughout the city of Grand Rapids, and 36% of our census tracts fall in our neighborhoods of focus, which are in the 1st Ward and the 3rd Ward near the west and south side of Grand Rapids. Within this defined area that we often refer to as NOF, we have the highest percentage of our residents of color who live here across the city. And we also have the highest rates of disparities. If you look at any quality of life indicators, whether it's income attainment, poverty, health outcomes, these all have the highest disparities here and are also located in the same area that we have our highest residents of color. So we are being very specific in our work at the city across departments to be focused on doing work in our neighborhoods of focus. And we know that this is just one way that we can do work to try to eliminate inequities by intentionally investing in this area. And so just to kind of key in specifically in our strategic plan under our health and environment priority, the very first objective is to reduce carbon emissions and increase climate resiliency. And there are a number of things that we are doing across the city to focus on that. But specific to this work, just really wanted to highlight that we are really working to create and support programs and policies that can help reduce carbon emissions from both our building sector and our transportation sector throughout the community. And that's where this work aligns to the city's strategic plan. There are a few recent reports that have come out as well that are just very important, I believe, in terms of understanding why we lead with equity in this space and why we're working on environmental justice. And so I'm going to go through these three relatively quickly, but I do want to make you all aware that these are available. And if you're looking to further your understanding of environmental justice issues, particularly within the Grand Rapids, I really encourage you to take a look at a couple of these reports. The first one is done by our very own Grand Rapids community organization, Link Up, looking at health, environment, and race in Grand Rapids. And then in 2019, the University of Michigan, some graduate students in their SEAS program did a phenomenal report looking across the state of Michigan at inequities and environmental injustice happening across the state of Michigan. And they also looked at and mapped the highest data points for environmental pollutants and overlaid that with demographics such as poverty and race and ethnicity. And unfortunately, here on the left side of this screen, the top 10 census tracts with the most environmental injustice, 5 of those are located within the city of Grand Rapids. And so lastly, from a national perspective, the EPA has really started to move with respect to climate change and equity as well, and just released a new report last fall that you can take a look at. But again, similar to the work that we're doing, they're really focusing on some specific social vulnerability groups, of which they classify here in one as minority, which aligns with our communities of color and the low-income individuals that we're looking to work and support through this work as well. And so this is an extra resource that I encourage you to look at, particularly as we start talking about the specific risks to our community and how those can be addressed through the buildings in our city. So now with that, I also want to just take a moment and talk about how all of these are really connected together. And we're working very hard to ensure that the impacts on human health are really elevated in this work. Historically, sustainability professionals like myself, I believe, have predominantly focused on the environmental conservation aspects of this work, which are extremely important and are going to be a vital part of this work. But we're also really going to be elevating and focusing on human health and thinking about how our built environment impacts the people who are in those buildings on a day-to-day basis, whether it be for work, where you live, where you recreate. And then, of course, economic prosperity, looking at the opportunity for higher market value, for lower tenant vacancies, reduce utility bills for the tenants, and higher workforce retainment for buildings that are designed and operated with environmental and health principles included. Okay, so that was kind of just a quick overview from the city of Grand Rapids with respect to why we're leading with this work. And now we're going to go ahead and jump into the Zero Cities project and give a little bit of an overview of that project, and then we'll pause after that and take some questions. So the Zero Cities project, we started in 2017. There were 12 cities from across the country that were invited to participate. And I really want to thank Sherry Holman at the U.S. Green Building Council for advocating on the national platform that the city of Grand Rapids be invited to participate in this program. And it was a 3-year grant funded program that was intended for the cities that were participating to develop kind of a policy roadmap, or what would it look like from a city perspective to try to help the buildings across our community achieve zero net carbon by 2050. Well, what does zero net carbon mean? Of course, working to get our buildings as energy efficient as possible, and then looking to either produce on-site or to purchase enough carbon-free renewable energy that would meet the building operations energy consumption. This was in partnership nationally with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. And we also looked at, with respect to kind of that desired outcome, as I mentioned, trying to determine what it is we can do from a city government perspective, and looking at that. And again, wanted to acknowledge the WEGI Foundation has been a significant partner in terms of helping us get started with this work in Zero Cities project, and then has come alongside with us with respect to E.H.Zero. And a lot of that funding has gone to help support the 2030 district in terms of hopefully some of the education and engagement events you've been able to participate that have been offered over the last several years, really thinking about zero carbon buildings, and then specifically money that was earmarked for the Urban Core Collective to serve as our equity partner in this work and really help lift that portion up. So some of the outcomes, there were a lot that we achieved a little over the 3 years. Of course, things were slowed down with the pandemic, as happened with, I believe, nearly all work probably over the last couple of years. And I'm going to go through a few items here, but a few things that I really just want to lift up is that I really believe the most important outcome was that myself and the city was able to create collaborative and innovative partnerships that were rooted in equity and environmental justice. And that's true with the 2030 District, the U.S. Green Building Council, and then of course our very strong equity partnership with the Urban Core Collective. We're not going to go into it today, but we'll make sure that you have access to some information, and we'll bring some opportunities back to you to dive a little bit more into the equity in the future. The Urban Core Collective really led on the creation of our local Grand Rapids equity assessment tool, and also doing some surveying of our residents who live in our neighborhoods of focus to better understand their needs and the obstacles that they're experiencing when trying to implement energy efficiency and carbon reduction measures within their own homes. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other items that are on here, but I did just also want to lift up the last two on the right. Our partnership with the 2030 District in this work really allowed us to focus on and really be one of the first in the country to include environmental sustainability requirements in our cannabis licensing requirements. So we have some very specific requirements for tracking of energy data, as well as for some pretty significant energy efficient lighting to be implemented within the grow facilities. And we've received national recognition for the work that we've been doing in this area, and have been identified as a model for leading with equity in the building policy development sector. So kind of looking from the 3-year plan, I did just want to help everybody understand that when we started, the original plan on the left was really for the 12 cities that were participating, right? We were going to get some technical assessment done of our communities, which we'll talk about. Everybody, they were doing a national equity assessment tool. They wanted us all to engage our communities. The ultimate goal was to develop policies and then to share what we learned and replicate that success with other cities. Well, in the middle is what most cities did. And then on the right is what we did in the city of Grand Rapids. And we took a different approach for a number of reasons, but really because we wanted to authentically lead with equity. And as you'll see, we also found in our building assessment that we have significantly more single-family residential in the city of Grand Rapids than the other participating cities have within their respective city boundaries. And so for that, we just recognized and wanted to focus a lot on the residential side, knowing that the 2030 District has been in place and has really been supporting commercial building stakeholders on their journey to learn about zero carbon. And so while we all did a technical building assessment, which we'll share a little bit about, there was a national equity assessment tool that was done. Of course, I mentioned USGBC continued our commercial building sector engagement, but we really worked with the Urban Core Collective to authentically engage our residents. We didn't want to just assume that we knew why they were not participating in some of the weatherization energy efficiency programs, and we wanted to dig deeper into that. And then at the same time, a sister initiative, which maybe some of you have heard of, the Community Collaboration on Climate Change, also known as C4, was something that the city partnered with others, including the Urban Core Collective and the U.S. Green Building Council, to launch. And that's really intended to create an infrastructure across our community to allow for all of us collectively to center equity in our climate change and environmental sustainability work. So again, the C4 is a separate initiative. That is a community-driven initiative, but we recognized that there was a lack of that infrastructure in the city of Grand Rapids and generally. And so to try to lead with equity work specific to just buildings was very difficult when we didn't have a more holistic infrastructure in place. And so that's something that the partners worked really hard on. And then we wanted to do our own specific Grand Rapids equity assessment tool to use our data to understand our community. And those things took some additional time. And so ultimately we did not create policy at the end of this program. And I don't see that as a failure because we wanted to be authentic and true to the challenge of embedding equity in this work. And I'm extremely grateful for the work that was completed in that time and for what we were able to accomplish. And it allowed us to continue this work, which you'll hear a little bit more about when I turn it over to Jen here shortly. But I did want to share with you, knowing you're in the commercial building space, some very specific data points that came out about the buildings and the built environment that we have across the city of Grand Rapids. Now, this data was originally pulled from the city's data from our assessor's office in December of 2017. So of course, things have changed in our community, but this really helps to provide a really good picture for what is going on with respect to buildings in our community. And I do want to note that this was inclusive of commercial buildings as well as single family residential, multifamily residential, but the Zero Cities project excluded industrial properties or parking facilities. And so when we look at all of the buildings in the city of Grand Rapids, we have just over 205 million square feet of built environment. You can see it's a little over 62,000 buildings. And when we look at the breakdown, it was very eye-opening to me to learn that of all those buildings, nearly 52% of that square footage is made up by single family residential housing. You can see the other 32% is commercial, and then just shy of 17% is multifamily, which we define as 5 units or more. And so now that we started to understand the size of our buildings holistically, we also looked at where those buildings fit in terms of how many do we have at what size. So this graph along the bottom shows a breakdown by square footage. So the first bar on the far left is 0 to 20,000 square feet, going all the way over to the right, which is greater than 200,000 square feet. So of course, our single family residential is less than 20,000 square feet. Pretty much all of the multifamily, which is in the purple color, and then commercial buildings are more spread out. A lot of them do fall under 20,000 square feet. You can see that we have some in the middle, but we also have a significant number of those buildings, well, not significant, excuse me, about 50, both above 100,000 square feet and 200,000 square feet. And so then if we wanted to get a little more granular to understand again, well, what kind of buildings are these, particularly around the commercial building size and breaking that down? When we look at the types of buildings that we have the most square footage of in the city, it's unrefrigerated warehouse space, office space, college, K through 12, retail, hospital, and then you can see some of the others that start to get a bit smaller as we work our way down the graph. But now we understand what we have the most square footage of. And so then what we did in terms of working with our partner Architecture 2030 is they took our building information and a lot of national information and working with energy information to estimate how much energy is being consumed by those building types. And so this is starting to look at, a lot of times your bigger buildings consume more energy. And so you can see the top here again aligned with those that we have a lot of the square footage of, with college, office, hospital, unrefrigerated warehouse space. And the orange bars here, you'll see through a number of slides, represent the amount of energy being consumed from natural gas. And the green bars represent what's being consumed from electricity. And so then once we start to look at this a little bit more on the left here, you can see that really across the 3 different building types, whether single family, residential, commercial, et cetera, about 65% of all of the energy being consumed in our buildings is natural gas, with the remaining 35% being electricity. And then on the right, this bar chart really starts to look at, if you're familiar with the measure of EUI, or energy use intensity. And that really is how much energy is being used per square foot of a building. And this provides a normalized way to compare different types of buildings to each other, so that regardless of their size, you can start to understand what are really your most energy intensive building types. And this is where things start to change. If you look on the left, those buildings that are really the most energy intensive within our community really are around the food industry. So fast food restaurants, supermarkets, traditional restaurants, convenience stores, with hospitals also being in there as the third most energy intensive. And what you're seeing on the bar graph here, just to show, is that the green number at the top of the bar is the average energy use intensity, EUI, which again is total energy consumed per square foot for that building type. And then what's shown in white would be, a goal to achieve a 50% reduction of that energy use intensity. So then we transition now. Okay, now we understand what types of energy are being consumed by our buildings, but we're really trying to get to greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emission reduction. And so, as I mentioned on the top left, our national partners really looked at our fuel mix, and in the city of Grand Rapids and working with our utility partners. So as I mentioned, about 65% of what we're consuming in our buildings is actually natural gas. But on the bottom right, you can look at when we convert that into greenhouse gas emissions, it's actually our electricity. Currently, it was 2018 when this was done, which is much more greenhouse gas emission intensive, right? A lot of the electricity that is supplied to us from Consumers Energy, our primary electricity utility, is generated by the burning of coal, which has a very large greenhouse gas footprint associated with it, or carbon footprint. And so even though electricity is used quite a bit less in our buildings, it accounts for the majority of the greenhouse gas emissions being emitted in our community from the building sector. So if we want to focus on driving down greenhouse gas and carbon emissions, then the data shows us to really be focused on electricity first. So then just taking this data and putting it together, wrapping it back around to our building types, if we're to look at all of our buildings that we included in this analysis and think about the greenhouse gas emissions being generated collectively across the community, commercial buildings here make up 48%, and single family residential make up 38% of all of those greenhouse gas emissions, with multifamily accounting for 14% of the total across the community. And so some of the key findings here with respect to this information, when we started to dig in and look at, okay, well, let's look at what we're going to classify as larger commercial buildings, those that are greater than 10,000 square feet in our community. We found out that less than 2% of all of the buildings in our community are commercial buildings larger than 10,000 square feet. And it was only about 1,200 buildings. So not a lot of buildings, but are making up that group of buildings greater than 10,000 square feet accounts for 42% of all of the greenhouse gas emissions being emitted in our community. So an opportunity to help focus and work with those, such as yourself, who are working in the commercial building sector, knowing that if we're able to make some reductions in greenhouse gas emissions with respect to some of these commercial buildings, we're going to have a really significant impact on driving down greenhouse gas emissions. Another point of what we looked at and some of the work that we did was with respect to where do we think our community is going to be in 2050? Because we're not just planning for what's happening with respect to our buildings that are in existence today, but how are we creating an environment and a scenario in which in 2050, we're going to be at a place where we can achieve zero net carbon or get as close to that as possible. So we worked a lot with our development center and our economic development team here at the city of Grand Rapids to understand building trends, permit trends, construction trends, and what's happening so we could start to understand what things look like in the future. So we are projected to continue to increase in our population in the city of Grand Rapids between now and 2050. And then if we are just to look at building area trends, the graph on the left, gray is existing buildings in our community, and the blue is what we expect to see with respect to new construction. And then on the right, it breaks it down into 3 different building types, right? So we're really pretty built out and don't have a lot of opportunity for more construction of single family residential. You can see the majority of new construction happening with respect to multifamily as well as commercial buildings. And if you look at the yellow line that's at about a 45-degree angle, that is looking at the amount of buildings that will go through a sale in their lifetime. And the blue line on the bottom is the number of buildings that will go through renovation. So a significant number of our existing buildings that we have between now and 2050 will undergo a renovation. And so when we look at that with respect to energy, again, wanting to think through that, similarly aligned, the majority, probably right around 70% of all the energy that's going to be consumed by buildings in 2050, it's by the buildings that we have in existence today. And that's why it's so important that we're doing work to support the buildings that we have today and help drive down those carbon emissions. There will be some additional carbon, of course, from any new construction that happens, and there's an opportunity to implement those best practices from the very design and construction of those buildings. So some of the key takeaways that we had in wrapping up this work is that, of course, that single family residential, because it accounts for so much of our building sector, and 39% of our greenhouse gas emissions, that is a key area to focus to have a significant impact. Our electricity, while it's only supplying about 36% of the energy to our buildings, it's responsible for greenhouse gas emissions of 64% of our total GHG emissions. Now, as consumers continues to make progress on their voluntary carbon reduction goals, we're going to start to see that come down over time. But that's the current state of where things are now. We mentioned already, and Aaron and I talked about the low number, about just a little less than 1,200 buildings that are greater than 10,000 square feet, but account for 42% of all of our greenhouse gas emissions. We're looking at renovation rates, and we understand that almost half of our existing buildings will go through some type of renovation. So that's an opportunity to start layering in some energy efficiency projects and work. We know that there will be a lot of sales of our buildings, particularly single family, and that buildings will turn over, again, a point of opportunity at the time of a sale of building. And we know that there'll be some new construction, specifically in the multifamily residential sector. And so what does this mean? And this was put together for us by Architecture 2030. What does all of that mean from a policy perspective? And what they ultimately concluded as key insights from all this data on behalf of the city of Grand Rapids is, really focusing on energy efficiency upgrades for single family residential buildings that has large potential, really working on decarbonizing our electric grid, knowing that that's such a significant source, trying to focus on support for renewable energy generation and the purchase of renewable energy, focusing on those energy upgrade policies that are aimed at the buildings that are greater than 10,000 square feet. And looking at a time of point of renovation or point of sale being two key opportunities to look at having some energy efficiency, energy upgrades, and decarbonization programs. And also nationally, they're really focused on working on zero code provisions with respect to new construction. And so I think here, just to wrap this up before I turn it over to Jillian, we also work to create a model, which is publicly available. You can click on this link and go to it, where we were modeling a number of different scenarios. And so this shows your building area, your energy consumption, and your emissions. And so this basically says, if you select, well, what if consumers actually meets their voluntary reduction targets? Well, that means 76% of all of the square footage in our community would be impacted. And it means that a 13% reduction in energy, but it means a 67% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions associated with it. And I should say this, in this current scenario on the slide here, it's also taking into consideration if you had energy efficiency improvements for existing single family residential, energy efficiency improvements for large commercial, and a zero code. And so you can toggle these on or off to start to understand what some of these different policies and what the implications could be. Now, I will say we are working on revising this model and getting more information in it and more data. So if that's something that you're interested in working with us on, please let us know. And so with respect to that, I am now going to invite Jillian to come back on and share a little specifically about some of the great work our partner at 2030 District has been doing in the Zero Cities project.
Thank you so much, Allison. I'm Jillian Gam, and with the Grand Rapids 2030 District, we are the commercial side of this project. After I'm done speaking, this will be the time for reflection and questions, so stay tuned. So on the next slide, you'll see that the Grand Rapids 2030 District is a public-private partnership that is committed to creating high-performance buildings and smart mobility. So the main attractions that we're trying to do here with the 2030 District is we're trying to draw down carbon from the Grand Rapids built environment, but in a way that is increasing the marketability and profitability and the attraction of talent to property owners in Grand Rapids and keeping Grand Rapids a strong and vibrant community where we all live, work, and play. We're achieving this through the building energy use and water consumption of the buildings, which is what we're talking about here today. But we also have a strong focus on transportation, GHG emissions, and a big partner on that is the Mobile GR. They do incredible work. If you're looking to connect more on that, we'll be able to be conduit for that information. So focusing more on the buildings perspective and a brief history about this. So in December 2015, Mayor Hartwell really took this project home as one of his sunset initiatives. And it's been brought to the attention of Mayor Bliss, and we've been going forth ever since. So we are serving the commercial building owners for tools and resources to empower building owners to reach these ambitious goals. The 2030 district is able to provide the education, which will be seen on the next slide. And we educate on everything that surrounds the high performance buildings, from carbon reductions as well as the health of the occupants. So you'll see that this incorporates a magnitude of items. So the building occupant health, energy efficiency always relates back to the climate change solutions that we're all working on in the built environment, because the built environment incorporates 40% of global emissions. So we have a lot of opportunity to make an impact on our climate change goals together here. So the continued on with who is in our 2030 district. From the majority of who is participating, we have about, the majority of us is over 200,000 square feet. And these buildings who are large, over 200,000 square feet, as you had seen earlier in the building stock assessment, have a big punch and a big opportunity for impact on our carbon emissions from our built environment. So we're really excited to be able to provide the resources to these specific folks, and everyone who wants to participate in the 2030 district, you'll be able to see the things we offer on the next slide. So a really amazing tool that has just come out from the 2030 district is this new partnership with Ledger. Ledger is leading the market on real-time carbon tracking. This real-time carbon tracking updates automatically for you as a 2030 member to have real-time carbon coming from your scope 1 and 2, directly from your meters, as well as keeping track of the actual carbon emissions that are happening on the grid in real time. So this is going to be available to 2030 district members, as well as a live dashboard on the 2030 district to be able to see how we're doing as a city. What's amazing about this tool is that you're able to see how your connections with your buildings are affecting your GHG emissions. So for example, if you just did an audit and then you hit some of those energy reduction goals, you'll be able to see that actually happen on this platform. This is another great tool for your ESG reporting to compliance, and measuring your own goals internally and being able to see how we're doing as a whole city. So we have a lot of resources to help the building owners get there. You can check out the 2 links that we'll be able to put in the chat right now to our YouTube channel with past webinars and case studies and all these educational videos about what is a high performance building and how do you actually achieve that, as well as our zero carbon resources library built robustly for this sort of intervention. So if you're curious specifically on how do I make a Z&E building, or what does it really mean to decarbonize my electricity, you'll be able to find that here. And we'll be able to put that in the chat for you after this slide. But thank you for your time. And we're going to open up for questions now.
I see there are a couple questions that were submitted in the questions and answers. So I'll go ahead and start with those while everyone else is warming up and taking yourself off of mute to be able to ask some questions. So what project is the city doing in the food, grocery, or hospital industry that are the most energy intensive? So specifically right now, the city doesn't have any type of program or policies that are focused on the food, grocery, or hospital industry. It's been something in terms of partnership with the 2030 district, engaging those different industries in voluntary commitments and programs to date. But as a part of this E.H.Zero program, and which you'll hear about here momentarily, and how we want to co-create some solutions together, We very much welcome and will be inviting those building managers, facilities directors, et cetera, to participate. I actually previously in my career worked in a hospital doing sustainability work and doing a lot of energy analysis. And so I'm very familiar with how energy intensive hospitals are. And I also worked in the food industry and some similar things there. So a lot of opportunity. And if you're in those areas and you would like to work with us on that, please let us know. With respect to, will the results of this project affect the city's future policies on construction, sustainability, et cetera? So again, here shortly, we're going to talk a little bit about what we learned, how we took what we learned from Zero Cities Project and we're transitioning into the E.H.Zero process. And what we want to do is we want to work with all of our stakeholders, you included. This is just the kickoff and the launch to kind of get everybody up to speed as to what has happened and the information that we were able to collect and analyze. And now we want to work with all of you to determine what is best for our community. Is it best that the city pass some type of policy, as other cities across the United States are doing, to address carbon emissions and energy consumption in buildings? Is it working more closely with our utility partners to better leverage pilot programs, utility rebate programs? Is it focusing more on financing solution if that's been a significant barrier or obstacle? So really what we're getting ready to do is to launch into looking at those different opportunities with all of you and having a conversation about what your concerns are, what you think would work the best, so that we can identify some of the tools that can be implemented here in the city of Grand Rapids to help us as a community achieve those goals. So I don't know if anybody, feel free to come off of mute if you have some other questions.
A quick answer while folks are coming off of mute. Saini asked about the 2030 District Ledger membership. So a ledger is a tool that the 2030 District is offering our members. So it's free. Usually it's a quite a high priced value for individuals, but with the district and the opportunities that we have together, we're able to offer that to our members for free. So if you're interested in being a 2030 District member, another flash, it's also free. We'll be able to throw the membership opportunities in the chat if you want to participate. And I welcome further conversations if you're interested in Ledger for your own buildings.
Jillian, can you speak a little to who can participate in the 2030 District?
Yes, absolutely. So 2030 District building members are buildings whose address is within the Grand Rapids city boundary. And if you want to participate as a building owner or a manager, also a tenant can participate through your built environment, through your building space. If you are a service provider or a contractor, we also have an opportunity for professional stakeholders. There is a robust community as well of community stakeholders involving other folks who are tangential to this work, and we're able to partner for more robust collaboration through community stakeholders, for nonprofits, for organizational groups who want to support this work and are aligned with the mission.
Thanks, Jillian. Saini, so excited that you're here with us today. So I know you're a small business owner, so you have an opportunity to join the 2030 District through your small business. But right now, Jillian, correct me if I'm wrong, 2030 District single family residential spaces are one of the classifications of buildings that are not eligible for participation in the 2030 District. So just to help make a clarification there. And I misspoke, but was given a prompt. We do ask that you type in questions into the Q&A if you have questions as our method of collecting those. So I'll take a little pause here and see if anybody else is furiously typing. And then I think we might be able to transition. And actually, while we're doing that, I think I am going to transition and allow my colleague to share. So we'll give it a pause here, and I'll go ahead and invite Jen to take over, but feel free if you have. I see another question that came up. Hi, JJ. So entities that have been members of the 2030 District, are there any new activities to engage those members?
Great question, JJ. So I think the new and most attentive development that we have is that we're offering the Ledger platform to our existing 2030 district members. And that will enable us to have a real-time understanding of what our whole district is using. I think that at the moment, the webinars that are coming through the E.H.Zero project, which the 6 of them will be coming up, we'll be able to share that with you, as well as the Ledger tool are the 2 highlights that we're pushing to our members right now.
And yes, today's presentation will be shared with you after the event and made available. Okay, well, feel free to continue putting some questions in the Q&A. And at this time, we're going to transition over, which is the exciting part. And I hope that you're, keep the wheels turning for some additional questions, because now we're kind of transitioning from the past work that we've done and what we've learned from that past work. And now we're taking it to the next level and continuing this work. And so I invite Jen Spiller. She's in my Office of Sustainability at the City of Grand Rapids and serves as our Healthy and Sustainable Buildings Policy Specialist. Is going to walk us through the next presentation. And then again, we'll have some time for some dialogue. So Jen, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Allison. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Spiller, and I'm going to be talking about the E.H.Zero Initiative. So given the great work that came out of the Zero Cities project, the partners involved decided to continue the relationship and launch this new initiative to create policies and programs for equitable, healthy, and zero carbon buildings. So the desired outcome of E.H.Zero is that we have residential and commercial building policies and programs co-created and supported by community, focused on increased equity, affordability, and health while reducing energy consumption and carbon emissions. The key objectives of E.H.Zero, we have quite a few, but and definitely to lead with equity in the development of these policies and programs. We want to educate all interested stakeholders on the Zero Cities project outcomes and possible policy options, as well as engage stakeholders in co-creation of these policies and programs. We want to enhance and expand our building policy modeling dashboard to support data-driven decisions. And I'll be talking more about this upcoming, but we want to launch a renovation pilot of at least 5 homes. And the goal of all of this is to culminate in presenting a package of policies and programs to present to the City Commission next fall that will equitably decarbonize residential and commercial buildings. And then after that, create a plan to implement them, create a whole home style navigation program to improve services to residents related to housing, and to incorporate building sector specific goals and strategies into the forthcoming climate action and adaptation plan. So these are the key partners currently in the E.H.Zero team. We have the City of Grand Rapids, which is taking the lead on education and promotion, especially for residents, and doing policy and program research. Also looking at what other cities are doing as far as sustainable building design and decarbonization. We're also planning to complete a building carbon emissions inventory and vulnerability assessment, and to assist with engagement of residents and finalize policy recommendations with feedback from the community, and to assist with implementing these policies and programs in the city. The Urban Core Collective has been our key equity partner and has engaged with residents, especially during the Zero Cities project, with their energy utility survey and the equity assessment tool. So they've done a lot of energy and utility education and promotion. They also coordinate a small BIPOC equity consultation team, who are, it's a 5-member team that I'll talk about upcoming to in the next slide. But they basically will provide input on the policies and programs that we put forth. And then the U.S. Green Building Council, as you all know, they're very basically they're our commercial sector partner, leading with education on options for tracking energy use and carbon for commercial buildings. And they've been a key partner in developing the marketing and educational materials, data tracking, and overall engagement with business and commercial building partners. So our 3-year budget for the E.H.Zero Initiative is projected to be about 1.3 million. And a lot of that is to help manage the projects involved with E.H.Zero and to compensate staff. And also we have budgeted compensation for our BIPOC consulting team, as well as that also includes the money involved with the renovation pilot. We're estimating that we would serve at least 5 homes with about 30,000 each in wraparound services for energy and health improvements to the home. And so far we've secured almost 1 million in funding, thanks to the Weggy, Kresge, and Summit Foundations. Here are our BIPOC consulting team members. They have an extraordinary range of backgrounds. We have Reina Garcia, Anna Jose, Kareem Scales, Dessa Challa, and Dana Knight. So what's next for E.H.Zero? So far we've launched the BIPOC equity consultation team. We're continuing fundraising. We've hired staff at the city, or my role, to assist with researching some of these policies. And next we're working on confirming our housing partner, which I'll talk about in a moment. And that's expected. So we're expected to have a housing partner join our team by the end of March. This summer, the Office of Sustainability is working on completing a community-wide carbon emissions inventory. And this spring through the spring of 2023, we'll be launching our engagement with community stakeholders in the co-creation of policies and programs for decarbonized buildings. In the summer, early fall of this year, we plan to begin the renovation pilot. And we plan to work in partnership to include learning and housing outcomes in the Housing Fund Development and Community Master Plan initiatives, which you'll hear more about later in the presentation. And then in the fall of 2023, presenting a package of building policies that will improve affordability and health outcomes while reducing carbon emissions for the City Commission to consider and hopefully adopt. So we've launched our educational campaign as of today. So the U.S. Green Building Council, they've put together a great schedule of events. If you register for this event, you've probably seen the list of forthcoming events that I'd encourage you to attend. I do want to note the March 24th event on this slide is going to be on building performance standards. But overall, each of these events will take you through different policy strategies that different communities are implementing to help track and reduce energy usage and carbon emissions. So the residential housing partner that we're seeking to join the E.H.Zero team will manage the housing renovation pilot program. So initially we're hoping to start with 5 homes and hopefully increase that number of homes. But the goal is to do wraparound services for energy and health. Basically, living in Michigan, we have a lack of insulation in a lot of homes. We plan to target neighborhoods of focus and to basically make sure that we are taking an equity-centered approach in this project. And the housing partner, they'll help us measure cost outcomes, health outcomes, and energy usage outcomes, with one of our big goals being to reduce the energy burden on residents. And we hope to leverage other existing programs, which will provide insight for us to later develop either a whole homes navigator program or look into other ways where we can improve services to the community to get energy improvements to their homes. And so Overall, we hope to understand what works best for people, what's working with the services that are currently offered, where do we need to improve, and what are the co-benefits when affordability, health, and sustainability are addressed simultaneously. And we hope to apply these learnings to the policies and programs that we put forth to the City Commission. We have our RFP out currently. It's due next Monday to me, and then we're hoping to have the final partner announced by March 31st. And these are some of the policy options that we're following and exploring for both the single family residential side and the commercial side. On the commercial side, many of these options will be discussed in the upcoming webinar events. So building performance standards, energy disclosure, energy and water benchmarking, building codes, and incentivizing renewable electricity. And on the single family side, we're really looking into ways to improve the rental certification program for energy auditing and lead sampling, looking at disclosure of 12 months of utility data, for example, certification for environmentally friendly design, training for contractors and construction, and comprehensive all electric ready new construction requirements, and looking at ways to create a whole homes navigation or concierge service for residents. And so these are all options at the moment. So nothing that we're set on, but these are what we're researching and hoping to bring to the community with more information on to see what would work best for Grand Rapids, what would the community like to see, where do we need to make adjustments to meet our community's needs. And these are the stakeholders that we're looking to engage. So traditionally in the building and energy space, designers and contractors and engineers are among the first to be thought of and engaged. But we're really looking to get ahead of project initiation and looking at investors, working with our city departments to create incentives for green building projects. And definitely we are focused on the people side and how buildings and how these policies and programs to improve buildings, or how these policies and programs will affect people in our community. So tenants, neighbors, employees, and neighborhood associations, for example. And now I'm going to pass it back over to Allison. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. So here, before I turn it over to my planning colleague, I just wanted to highlight kind of a holistic approach that we're taking. E.H.Zero and what we've talked about so far is mostly specific to, local building policy options and what can we do with respect to kind of city government and opportunities that we can have. But we're very much taking a broad look, knowing that there are a lot of different tools to use to bring down carbon within the built environment. So of course, continuing to support our voluntary programs such as the 2030 District and really trying to leverage utility programs in rebates and ensuring that everyone is capitalizing on those where available. My colleague here in a moment is going to talk about how all of this work is going to be tied into, and the components really specific to kind of our zoning ordinance, and from that planning perspective, what can be addressed through the master planning update process. I am also, I think I saw somebody put in a question with respect to, what's being done around incentives. And that is something that I'm in conversation with our economic development team and trying to explore some ideas about how we can create and incentivize lower carbon, lower greenhouse gas emission buildings through some of the economic development department's tools and some of the different financial incentives, tax abatements and tax increment financing that's offered. So stay tuned. There'll be some more information about that soon, but we understand that that is an important opportunity to work with the development community on trying to achieve some of these outcomes. The city does a lot, and I actually have been spending an increasing amount of my time engaging with state legislation around regulating renewable energy, installation of solar on buildings and support for that, as well as doing a lot with the Michigan Public Service Commission in terms of their oversight with respect to utilities and how they plan for energy efficiency, how they plan for renewable energy and the transition to a clean grid. And the city has even engaged in some of those cases. So that's extremely important. And we know that the faster that the grid is cleaned, then we're getting zero carbon electricity being delivered to our buildings in our community. And so that is an extremely important area to stay focused on. And then also continuing to look at and supporting the availability of some different financing options. And we will be having, if it's not here today, you'll get some information about how we're going to be bringing Michigan Saves to the community to learn some more about some of the great tools that they have. So I just really wanted to help everybody understand that we're not just looking to say, is there one policy that the city can pass and that that's going to be the ticket to success, because that's not the case. There are a lot of different tools that we need to be looking at and that we want to work with all of you to understand what do you think is the best approach, what will have the best outcomes, and what will support you the most in the development that you're doing and in the operation of the buildings that you have in our community. And so with that, I believe next up, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Leila Islani, who's going to share a little bit knowing just how important the master plan process is for all of this. So go ahead, Leila.
Thanks, Allison. Yes, so we in the planning department are beginning to update the community master plan. Our last one was completed in 2002, and we have amended it several times since then through the addition of corridor plans and area specific plans, but it is time for kind of a wholesale update of it. So next slide, please. So what is a community master plan? It's a blueprint for how community grows and evolves, as set forth by the Planning Commission and then adopted by the City Commission, and implementation is funded by the City Commission. It defines a long-range vision for the future, typically 20 years. So like I said, our last one was done in 2002. So it's getting to be about the time for a new one. And it's not just the city, writing this document. We're going to be doing a lot of community engagement and reaching out to residents, business owners, stakeholders to say, hey, where do we as a city want to be in 20 years? And then we put together a plan to get there. It primarily is concerned with the physical development of the community, the built environment. So like we've done some studies recently that show that we need a lot more housing. So a question this plan is going to address is, where does that housing go and what does it look like? It primarily focuses on topics such as population, economy, housing, transportation facilities, and land use, but there is also an opportunity to include topical concerns, and I'll touch on those on the next slide. And so the plan you can think of as the vision, and then after that is done, then we'll be making amendments to our zoning ordinance, which kind of is the law and brings the plan to life and helps it be implemented. Next slide. So we did a review of the 2002 plan to figure out what's working, what's not working, and what needs to change with the next plan. So we hired members of the community to go out and read the plan and review the plan with their networks. COVID threw a kind of a wrench in that plan. So as you can see in these pictures, meetings were done distance, they were done online, they were done outside. And our facilitators did a great job. We saw ward distribution to make sure we were talking to people throughout the entire city. And we got a lot of great feedback from the people that participated. And that helped us write our request for proposals to hire a consultant team to help us with this plan. And that request for proposals went out on the 11th of this month. So consultant teams have until mid-March to put together proposals, and we're excited to see who responds and what's proposed. Next slide. And so topics from that review with the community, overall, the review found that the plan holds up pretty well. It was based on smart growth principles, which are still relevant in the planning field and today and still used widely. So that smart growth principles, you can look it up later, but they primarily focus on, increasing density, increasing walkability, providing alternative modes of transportation, placemaking, all that great stuff. What the 2002 plan didn't touch on or could touch on, the new version could touch on more, were these topics. So equity wasn't really mentioned at all. Obviously, the city has a commitment to equity, as Allison touched on earlier, and housing. I touched on housing a little bit, but we need to increase our housing supply greatly, as I'm sure you've seen in the headlines recently. Mobility is something residents are always interested in. We've done some work with plans such as Vital Streets Plan and the Bicycle Action Plan since then, but just sort of incorporating alternative modes of transportation, continuing to do the great work we've been doing there. Safety came up a lot, and that is all sorts of safety, whether that is, just not slipping on sidewalks or better access, more curb cuts and sidewalks, or actually violence that we've been seeing in our city. Obviously, the police are doing work on that too. So this plan would complement kind of their efforts, not replace them. And then environmental justice and health, and then climate change mitigation and adaptation. So as one person put it, the 2002 plan was very 2002. It talked about, like clean air and clean water, and not so much like, hey, the climate is changing and what are we going to do about it? So that's where the work that's being talked about today, this plan will seek to complement that work. And we've been having discussions with our sustainability department to kind of figure out what that is going to look like. Next slide. So we also heard from that review that people want the plan to be data-driven. We know we need to evaluate and revise the future land use map. They want robust engagement. So we're going to be going out and doing a lot of engagement opportunities, and one size doesn't fit all. So that may be, kind of your traditional public meetings, pending COVID restrictions. That could include surveys, online engagement opportunities, maybe different pop-ups at different events. So we're excited to see what consultant teams propose for engagement. And then also, admittingly, we didn't do the greatest job after the 2002 plan kind of tracking and reporting on what has been implemented. So we hope with the next plan to set up some sort of online dashboard and easy way to sort of show our progress and maybe report out annually on how we're doing with plan implementation. Next steps, we've begun our steering committee meetings. They started in November. I know some members of the audience are on that steering committee. It's about 50 people the mayor appointed, and it includes a broad representation of our community. It's sector-wise, race and ethnicity, gender, ward distribution. So we're excited about that. They're meeting monthly. We released that request for proposals and hope to get some great proposals back in the next month. After that, we'll be interviewing planning consultant teams and figuring out who to select, and then hiring them, going through that formal approval process with City Commission, and then getting them on board, and then beginning kind of the public facing engagement component of the plan. So if you want to sign up for our newsletter, if you click on the next slide, please, there's some contact. Oh, wait, sorry. Quickly, here's the timeline. Here's what that looks like in timeline phase. So we're still in the project initiation phase, and then we're going to be going into the community input phase, and that has different phases, and then adoption would be in 2024. Okay, next slide. So if you want more information, you can go to this website, grandrapidsmi.gov/CMP, and that's where we're sort of posting updates. And there's also on the right side of that page, a place where you can input your name and email address. And then once, later this year, once we get those engagement opportunities up and running, we'll be emailing that list. So if you sign up now and you don't get any emails, don't worry, we're not sending any right now, but later this year, we'll be broadcasting kind of different opportunities, and that's the best way stay informed. And you're also welcome to contact me with any questions that you may have. And that is my presentation. So thank you, and I'll take any questions. Or I don't know if we have questions right now.
Almost, Layla. I think there's only one more slide, maybe. Let's see, maybe one
Okay.
or two more slides and then we'll break. So I appreciate you hanging on because I suspect people might have a couple questions about the master plan.
Sounds good.
So just to wrap up, this is separate from E.H.Zero work specifically, but the city's Office of Sustainability has a number of other actions that we're taking that are very complementary to the work of the E.H.Zero. And so just wanted to take a minute. I even saw somebody, I think in the chat, asking about a carbon emissions inventory. So this just helps show a couple of those other projects that we're working on. And so by July of this year, we're really looking to finalize a community-wide carbon emissions inventory to have better information holistically, not just about buildings, but transportation, other sources of greenhouse gas emissions across our community. We're working on a climate vulnerability assessment across our community. It probably won't be done quite by July, but that's something that we're working on as well. We just announced, and there's a draft available. I'll try to throw it in the chat if I can really quickly, but we have our revised regional hazard mitigation plan, which we've worked really hard to incorporate climate change into. It's currently open for public comment right now. And then by September, we made a commitment. We had a number of interested residents and advocates over the course of the last fall come to City Commission and thank the city for passing a municipal carbon reduction goal, which we passed, which is 85% reduction by 2030 and net zero for our own municipal operations, which is inclusive of our own fleet by 2040. That's a very best in class goal, much more progressive than the Paris Climate Accord or the President Biden or Governor Whitmer's goals. But we had some interested residents and stakeholders who questioned and asked whether the city could pass a community-wide carbon emissions goal on behalf of the community. And so as a part of that conversation, I committed to continue to engage with other stakeholders, including yourselves, and particularly the business community around how you would feel about a community-wide carbon emissions goal. And so could take a couple questions here today, but I don't want to dominate our time today on that specifically, but you can definitely follow up with me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. We're working on completing a climate action and adaptation plan. Of course, buildings will be a huge component of that. And the work that we're doing right now will be incorporated and included in that broader climate action and adaptation plan. We are working with the C4 as well as other community stakeholders. We're just in the beginning phases of that. So you'll start to hear more information and the ability to engage specifically in the creation of that plan if that's something you're interested in. We continue to work on reducing our own carbon emissions constantly across our own operations. And then really, as Layla mentioned, kind of the end goal here being a lot of this work, one of those key components being what's included in the ultimate community master plan that will be issued in 2024. So I think the next slide is where we wrap up and finalize and ask people if they have some questions. And Jen, I'll go ahead and ask. I think you can take down the slides, and if you want to turn your camera on and Jillian on, inviting people again, a reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A section or in the chat section, and we will answer some of those questions. I did see earlier somebody had asked about kind of the incentives, and I hope that the response that I gave about some of the work, it's very in the early initiative in terms of exploring what opportunities we have there. I saw there was a question about that, and I wanted to speak to that in the diagram with all of the gears to say that is a really important component to all of this. Don't be shy. I might regret it, but I'll ask your hard questions if you want to. We want this to be an open format, but also know this is just the first of what we hope to be a long-term partnership with many of you, where we, I know it's a lot of information that we shared today. We really just wanted to make sure that you had kind of the background for what we've been doing and some of the key moving pieces right now. Some of the most specific next steps that have been shared, right? Check out the 2030 district page for additional webinars that are going to be coming that can help you understand, what is electrification? What does that mean? What does it mean to achieve zero net carbon in buildings? What's a building performance standard, right? There are some other cities that are looking at and have passed policies that require a specific building segment. Like a lot of it's oftentimes buildings greater than 50,000 square feet, and they'll pass a policy through what is called a BPS, a building performance standard, that says those buildings specifically have to reduce carbon emissions by X amount by this date. Right. And they'll set some parameters or leave it open depending on how they draft the policies in those. So you have an opportunity through those webinar series to learn a little bit more about what those mean, what other cities are doing. Not saying that's what we're going to do here in the city of Grand Rapids, but we want to provide you with information on some of the most common tools that are being used in other cities. So after we spend, the next probably 3 to 4 months trying to do as much education with stakeholders as possible, that's when we will transition into kind of the more engagement co-creation style events where we want to, sit down with you at a table and pencils and really talk about, what you like, what you're concerned about, how you'd like to see things accomplished here in the city of Grand Rapids. So I see a question. Do you have any specific resources to assist or help who are working to make changes within their own organization? I think that's a really phenomenal question. So thank you for asking that question. I think I want to spend a little bit of time thinking about it a little bit more outside of some of the general resources that have been shared today, but I think you're getting more specifically at probably those of you who may work in larger commercial institutions or with larger employers, and how can you help perhaps advocate for some of this work or share it within your organization. And so I want to spend a little bit of time thinking about that, but I do think if you are in the business industry or similar type industry, the West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum is one of our partner organizations in the city of Grand Rapids that has been working to kind of support green team development within organizations and that type of work. So that's definitely an opportunity that I would encourage you to check out, and feel free to reach out to me directly and I can make an introduction if you'd like there. But I'll keep thinking about that, and but let me invite and pause for a minute, see if Jillian has something to add there.
From specifically just the building perspective, what a great way to first start and is that you don't know what you don't know, right? So we always recommend starting with an energy audit that will prioritize the energy conservation measures in accordance to how much energy you can actually save in your building. That's usually a great way not only to kind of paint the picture for what your portfolio is, it's also a great way to start those conversations. Like, wow, the ROI will be within 3 months if we do X, Y, Z, and kind of get the awareness going. That's usually a great way to start implementation of just getting folks aware and curious. You can build deeper those relationships and further push the mission forward from that sort of like threshold of implementation. We usually invite people to start there. Any further questions on that though, please follow up. And something that came to mind from what Allison was saying about this is the first round of engagement of education. And the 6 webinars that you've seen in the chat right now, we invite you to attend those and learn deeper. Also, we are very interested in what you think. So following every webinar will be, what do you take away? Well, how was your connection? As well as what do you want to learn more about? And following this will be a survey that can add to the webinars after the 6th, but also that's not necessarily the engagement around the policies. And that's a survey that's different from what we'll be able to offer after the education. I was wondering if maybe the city can dive a little deeper on that as well.
Oh, I apologize, Jillian. I was looking at the next questions.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Jennifer, the implementation survey, the engagement survey that we're going to do. When can we expect that? It's in a different timeline than the education itself.
We're planning to launch the engagement in May, and we're looking at using a tool called Public Input through the City of Grand Rapids, but in collaboration with the E.H.Zero team partners. And so it's just an easier platform to share information on while also getting feedback from the community. And so it's been used in like mobile GRs efforts to collect information about how people use for transportation in the city. It's been used to share like planning updates, or I've seen like where like different designs are shared to get input from the public on what they'd like to see. So that's forthcoming, and we'll be sure to send out the information once it's available.
Yeah, so definitely going to be taking a broad perspective to engagement, right? Knowing some people have the time or the ability to sit down at a table, and Layla's really an expert in this area, right? And brainstorm and work together with people, but we know we're going to have some larger opportunities. We welcome one-on-one conversation. Jen's really the lead for the city, or Jillian with respect to our 2030 district partner. Definitely going to be looking at that, but also other opportunities more broadly, as mentioned, surveying, just to say, what do you think about this? Give you an opportunity to provide some concerns or feedback if that's your preferred way to communicate some feedback with the city. And as Jillian was sharing, I was thinking, because I see Megan and JJ from our utility partners are on today. And I wanted to encourage the person who asked about how to, help move along your organization from inside the organization. I'd say really work with your utility partners as well. They can come in alongside you and help you understand, if you have an account manager or the local community affairs managers that help out can put you in touch with someone, but they really can help you tell the business case to your organization for implementing larger energy efficiency projects, as well as the cost savings that will come from that. So I think that that's really another key that we can help and partner with our utilities more to make sure that, especially some of the exciting innovative pilots that they have going on, that folks and institutions in our community are aware of those and are taking advantage of those. So that's something that we'll be working on through the E.H.Zero as well. And then I saw a similar question in the chat that was kind of saying, along the same lines about supporting change in an organization, but are there any recommendations for how to be engaged at a community level, thinking about volunteering and events and others? And so I do, that's kind of where the sister program of the community collaboration on climate change comes in. Hopefully here in the next month or so, there'll be a large announcement about that, but that is one area where we're asking people in the community who are interested in getting involved from kind of an individual level, if you will, on things going on in the community, or what you're doing in your own home or your own neighborhood, can start to get some more information and start to connect with others in the community that have similar interests. So we're hoping that that announcement should come out maybe in about a month or so. So keep an eye out for that. We'll make sure that you get some information there. And then I would say too, just, we in part of that C4 will be helping everybody be aware of the phenomenal organizations that we have in the community that are doing work and do offer specific volunteer events, right? Whether it's the West Michigan Environmental Action Council and they have rain barrel workshops. We're working a lot more with some of our community-based organizations. So the Urban Core Collective or the NAACP is doing a lot around environmental justice and have initiatives. Our community, our kitchen table has been doing a lot of work with respect to food work in the community. And I know even the Grand Rapids African American Task Force is doing some really phenomenal work as well. So through the C4, we're going to try to really help elevate some of those more localized efforts where people might be interested from a community perspective to get involved. But also just want to say, Layla touched on it, but here probably starting, I believe, toward the end of this calendar year, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for individuals to engage in the master plan process. So you are invited to come to those events and participate and help share, what your vision is and what you want the community to look like, for the next 20 years. So that's a great opportunity for you as well.
Something I want to add just real quickly is that some folks who are service providers can get really excited about this and sometimes don't necessarily know how to leverage their skill sets and their passions to be able to help drive carbon reductions in buildings. And I don't want you to underestimate the influence that you have in being able to help carbon reductions in Grand Rapids. you're able to connect with your customers, existing customers, and bring this information to them for a reason why they should be planning for the future of their buildings. So sometimes there have been a few professional partners who kind of messaged me, don't underestimate your ability to participate in this. The 2030 district is a great way to get involved with building owners and also participate in the master plan process and participate with E.H.Zero on the webinars. I just don't want you to underestimate the influence you have in being able to push this mission forward.
Somebody put a question in there, said, is this the right forum to share concerns? And I want to invite you to share concerns, right? We want to have an open dialogue. We want to receive your concerns so that we're aware of them. And, I suspect we're probably not going to have all the answers today by any means, but part of co-creation and what we authentically want to do is understand your perspective. And so even if you're not comfortable sharing it today, at least from a city's perspective, Jen is our first point of contact. So feel free to reach out if you want to have a conversation directly with her or any of our other partners. But I also welcome if you'd like to share any of your concerns in the chat or the questions and answers section as well. We welcome them. And I do think, Jen, can you put in the list for, I don't know, maybe everybody here will kind of automatically be enrolled, but the sign up for the E.H.Zero newsletter. The Office of Sustainability has started publishing kind of a broader monthly newsletter, but we also are going to have a specific piece of communication that comes out with more regular updates with respect to the E.H.Zero project. And so we invite you to sign up for that if that's something that you're interested in, so that you can receive the most up-to-date information on the project. This is where I need like some good pause music or something, but I definitely don't want to keep people longer than they need to be. We wanted to make sure that we scheduled enough time in case there were questions or more conversations to be had. Perhaps some people are writing lengthier concerns in their comment section. So I know that the team here, we can definitely stay on a little bit longer to receive some of those questions or comments. But I'm going to turn it over to Jillian here in a minute to see if she has any further discussions that she wants to share. I did see that somebody asked, has there been a PACE project in Grand Rapids yet? And unfortunately, no. I'd love to see a PACE project here. Since Jen's come on, one of the tasks that I've assigned to her is to develop a partnership with Lean & Green Michigan so that we can start promoting PACE more here in Grand Rapids. They've been located on the southeast side, and that's where the majority of their work is taking place. So we are looking at trying to better understand what the barriers are here and if there are needs of some of our institutions and organizations. So if you're experienced with that or you have thoughts, please reach out to us and let us know, because we would like to help see that be a successful tool used here in Grand Rapids. So I think just I'll keep monitoring the chat and the questions in case something else comes in, but just wanted to say on behalf of the City of Grand Rapids and our team here today, thanks for joining us in this launch kickoff of our E.H.Zero. But again, just really want to encourage you, to the extent you're interested, to stay involved in E.H.Zero, sign up for our newsletter, connect with Jen, enroll in the 2030 district if you're able to. We want to get you involved. You'll be seeing more information about the webinars, as well as other ways to engage with us as we move through this over the next, year to 2 years. And similarly, if you're interested in the master plan process, really just encourage you to keep an eye out there. As Layla said, there's a newsletter you can sign up for, and also some of those community engagement events that will be happening a little bit more later in the year. So much appreciation from the city. This is a very innovative approach that we are attempting to take here. We're trying to lead with our city values, and we want to be really collaborative with the community. I don't want to just sit in City Hall and write up a bunch of policies and ask that they be passed without having input from all of you or understanding of other voluntary ways to achieve some of the desired goals that we're looking to. So with that, I'm going to say thanks from the City of Grand Rapids, and I'll turn it over to Jillian.
Thank you so much. And yes, on behalf of the 2030 district, we thank you for coming. The 2030 District is the commercial stakeholder partner in this E.H.Zero project. So as a conduit to get involved in this and learn deeper about it, make sure you sign up for our newsletter that's in the chat right now and involved in our resources and our webinars. If you scroll through, you'll see my direct contact. We welcome one-on-one conversations. It's really important to us that we're able to serve your needs. So on behalf of the 2030 District, thank you so much for coming. And in your inbox in a day or so, you'll find the slides, the video recording, as well as a survey for how to move forward. So thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you have a lovely day.